Hello guys, this is NJ from the MBTI tier lists. Welcome to yet another mother of a tier lists on YouTube. In this episode, we will be contemplating on the question of which MBTI personality type would be the best at being an electrician. Now, the most important question is, first of all, which functions would be the best for being an electrician? And also, what does an electrician do to begin with? Now, so thinking about it, electricians, what they spend most of their day doing is something with their hands. It's kind of like a physical job. But of all of the hard labor, working class jobs, I like the electrician. That's like lightweight physical work. It's not that rough. It's not that demanding. It's way more neat than being a construction worker, for example. You're gonna have to be in some pretty sketchy positions and crawl through some weird places and everything. But at the end of the day, it's not like super rough or anything. The other thing that you need are brains. So you need to be using your logical faculties the whole time, and it's constant problem solving. To a great extent, there's doing wires and you're pulling them through pipes and doing physical stuff. But every now and then you have to stop and actually use your brains, basically. Now, what about feelings? When it comes to being an electrician, I mean, it is a purely technical craft. It's a purely physical, technical, logical thing. You don't do shit with FE or FI. You don't do anything with it, basically. You're gonna have to deal with the other guys at the construction site. Maybe if you had higher emotional intelligence, you would get along with them better or something. But to tell you the truth, being an electrician, you're a pretty independent guy, and it's very high probability that everybody at the construction site has very low level of emotional intelligence to begin with. And nobody expects the electrician to be a psychotherapist or anything. So these two functions are just completely irrelevant to the whole thing. It's a purely physical, technical, logical, problem-solving crafts. Okay. So how would you rate these functions? So I would say that as a standalone function, that there's only really one function that could do everything that an electrician would have to do, and that would be the TE, basically. Because the TE is not only a problem-solving function, it might be way more simple-minded than the TI. But the TE is more like an executional function. So you're getting shit done, you're being competent, you're doing the wires in a proficient manner and so on. TE has TE is an action function. It's a logical function. It will solve problems for you. And maybe most of the problems that you're going to be facing as an electrician can actually be solved with TE. Maybe the more complex problems at the higher levels would require TI or something else. But TE, for the most part, if you had to choose one function, TE can take the wires, figure out the wires, solve the logical problem, and then execute, and so on. Now, that being said, TE might not have enough brains for the most demanding stuff alone, which is why I didn't like TI is basically, TI would be the most powerful brains function for solving all the logical puzzles and problems. especially at the more advanced level. So I would like, I think have to give TI, the S tier basically. Now the curious thing are the intuitive functions, because these are also like brains functions. Now the argument that I would make is that like NE would be better for being an electrician than NI. I like NI is super abstract. It is the most distanced from reality. NI is the big picture function. So NI is trying to understand the underlying nature of everything. When it comes to being an electrician, like, yeah, I do not like NI would probably just solve all of the problems that you could face. But there is a lot of like mechanical complexity like in play in certain circumstances. There's like 1,000 wires and too many like command centers that you have to program and everything. So NI is actually not the greatest in going through all the little details of endless quantity of physical mechanic. I actually think like NE is like actually like way better for that purpose. I like NE is way more like TI than NI is. In the sense like NE, goes through all of the imaginable angles and ideas to the picture, and it sees all the little patterns around it. It is also the most quick-brained function. So like if you would give NI and NE just like this like plethora of wires and mechanics that you have to figure out in a fast-paced manner, I do not like NE would just be way faster in doing it than NI. I actually didn't like NE would be able to do it just as well as TI. Maybe a little bit more haphazardly, but NE would be like a really fast brains function. And as an electrician, like you need to be thinking like on your feet. Like having quick brains is really useful for an electrician. You are constantly thrown some kind of a logical problem that you have to figure out. NE would be the first guy to do it with their brains, okay? Now, when it comes to the SESI, I would like to give these guys the S tier as well, to be honest, because you are constantly doing something with your hands. You don't like gain like much brains from these functions per se, but I do not like, having observational skills and like noticing little details and becoming aware of things like in the physical space. It's kind of like a way of having brains without having brains. So, like much of like being an electrician, it's about like finding the one wire that is broken and noticing out of the 1,000 wires, which is kind of aloof and so on. So these like observational skills of physical reality are super important. And you have to give it to the NE as well, because NE does pay attention to the outside reality. So NE also like notices things NI does not. Okay, NI is just like out of it with reality. You're in a physical space. There's things happening and things going down. And you will be missing things with NI. Like with NE, like you're gonna be noticing things. So it's like NI just like isn't up there with these guys in my view. Now, of course, if you combine like NI with some thinking function, for example, and some sensory input, and it becomes super powerful, like NI definitely has the kind of capability of being a brains function, but like as a standalone function, I don't think that it's that powerful for being an electrician. For some other brains activity, it might be the greatest. But as an electrician, you're dealing with physical reality. You need to be having observational skills. You're dealing with an endless quantity of complex logical mechanic. So it's like NI. It's just like it's too big picture. It's too isolated from reality. The other point that you have to make for the sensory functions and NE to a certain extent is that like I do think that like you have to be a little bit of a monkey to be an electrician. Okay, like you're gonna be crawling through, maintenance shafts and finding that one wire that was broken that some asshole installed improperly 10 years ago. And like you're gonna be at the construction site, you're gonna be in houses, in factories, and in all kinds of places. Sometimes you need to climb, sometimes you need to twist your body into a weird position. Sometimes you're upside down and you're hanging and you're like, you're doing all kinds of shits, like physically speaking. So I like SE would be a really good function, for all the monkey work that you have to do. But once again, NE, man, like if you have ever seen like an ENTP or an ENFP, they're pretty much all monkeys as well. Maybe not as capable as the SE guys, but they are still quite nimble usually. They might not be the best with their hands, but they sure are, dexterous people usually. There is an explorative nature to being an electrician. Like you have to go all over the place and see things and notice things and so on. This is just like SENE going on. Why SI, I think that is an S tier function for being an electrician is also because you really need to be able to pay attention to the details and do everything carefully. Like if you fuck it up, like you're going to have to do it all over again. Like an SI user, they're super careful. And SI is really great at like noticing the little details, paying attention to the little details, and memorizing all the wires that you pulled today and where did you put them and make them go and so on. So like SI has a lot of stuff that would be really useful for being an electrician. So this would be like, I like these functions would kind of like be the greatest for being an electrician. Yeah. Now, where the real magic starts coming in is when you start combining these functions. So let's get into it. Okay, boys. Here we have the types. Okay. So, let's begin with the NI once again, the ENFJ. So I like the ENFJ is kind of like the perfect example. The ENFJ is almost like a scientific experiment of like if you had no other brains except NI going on for yourself, like how far could you go? Now, I dated an ENFJ, actually the only lady that I ever lived with. And she was by no means a dumb person or anything. Like, she was actually quite clever and quick-brained, like ENFJs usually are. She picked up things really fast with her brains and saw the underlying nature behind everything like NI users tend to do. Now, that being said, when it came to like complex logical mechanic stuff, or just like, logic where there's many variables that you have to kind of like calculate in your head, like in a fast-paced manner and so on, I have to say, like, she was kind of like a bit at loss, She would become confused. Like if there was too much logical thing going on, like too many variables in play, and she would just have to figure out the kind of like do the math on the whole thing, she would just be at loss. And this is like the inferior introverted thinking. So ENFJs, they're kind of like, you do have the NI, which is a really powerful brain's function. But it's like when you start throwing complex logical like stuff to an ENFJ, like they can be surprisingly stupid all of a sudden, and become confused. Which is why I actually think that like ENFJs wouldn't be the greatest as electricians. They do have like SE as their tertiary function, so that they could kind of do all the physical stuff. But the ENFJs at the end of the day, they're kind of abstract as well. Like, I mean, it's only like their tertiary function that is like SE. and inferior TI. Like I wouldn't like. I mean, of course, like I'm sure like an ENFJ could become an electrician if they wanted to, but I'm not sure if I would like recommend it. Like you would be spending your whole day doing something that like is the complete antithesis of your existence. To be honest, you know. It's the same thing with the ESFJs. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry, guys. The ESFJ is the other lady that I had, one of my longest standing girlfriends back in the day. And she had the same kind of problem that, you know, like she was, you know, really quick brained and everything. But once again, like you would throw in some like complex logic and she would just be at loss. I have also known like I once knew like an ESFJ who actually had like a pretty high IQ. You know, she was like a really he was like a really smart person and so on. But it's a funny thing that like if you're like an ESFJ, like you can be a smart person, like you have a high IQ, but still like become oddly confused when things are there's too many logical variables that you have to remember and calculate at the same time and so on. So it's a stupid thing, but like I like ENFJ and ESFJ, they're like the two examples of a type where it's not even about the IQ. Like it's about the functions. And if you suck with TI, then even if you are highly intelligent, like you're going to become confused every now and then. Now, once again, if you were like a high IQ ENFJ, ESFJ, like I'm sure that you could be an electrician, and ESFJ could definitely do wonderful wires and be really careful with them and so on. But yeah, like I'm not sure, like these are the two types, like I'm not sure if I would recommend becoming an electrician. Like if you had to choose a career. Now the other guys with NI are the ENTJ and INTJ. And you know, like I like you could go and ask like an INTJ and an ENTJ if they like as an INTJ or an ENTJ, somebody claiming that you couldn't figure out the logic of everything with NI, they'll be like, what are you talking about? Like I do it all every day. But with ENTJs and INTJs, it's like, no, like you have TE to go with the NI. Okay, so like the TE actually like, the TE is a function that for these two guys, it basically weaponizes the NI and makes it produce something meaningful and concrete. So it's like the NI in the hands of an ENTJ and INTJ becomes a super brains function. And with these guys, there is no logical puzzle that you could throw at these guys that they wouldn't be figuring out in a fraction of a second. Like, yeah, maybe the ENTP would be even faster. But I can tell you right now, like you can throw any complexity of a system at these two guys and they would be figuring it out. And so on. So like, you know, these guys, they have the brains. There's no way around it. They have the executional ability with the TE, you know. ENTJs, they have a tertiary SE. You know, I just have to say, like, ENTJs would probably make for the best electricians out there, to be honest. TE is the best singular function for the job at hand. You throw in the brains from the NI, and the ENTJ is one of the types that can totally capitalize on the NI and actually, like, derive the most benefit out of it imaginable for the purposes of an electrician. And then, you know, like if you're lacking anything, you throw in the tertiary SE and this guy is good with their hands. They have observational skills in physical reality. They notice things in physical environments. ENTJs are monkey enough. ENTJs would be the very epitome of the greatest electricians of all time. I mean, they basically have like a perfect functional stacking for the purpose at hand. Maybe not the greatest, but right up there. And that is simply because who else would be even greater? Start thinking about it. The ISTP guys. I mean, if you think about like an electrician, like you basically just think about an ISTP. You know, the ENTJ would be I think you just have to give it to the ENTJ, the S tier. I mean, there's like nothing that this guy couldn't do. ENTJs, you know, might be too simplistic. Like maybe they want to go and conquer the world or whatever, but they would just be the greatest if they actually put their minds to it as they're doing it. But the ISTP, I mean, like the ISTP has just like the fucking like God's stack for the electrician as with the functional stacking, starting with the TI, which is the best brains function for being an electrician. TI deals directly with logical mechanics. TI is the function that goes through the logical mechanics, builds a blueprint, understands the mechanics in play, and it's a directly mechanical logical function. So this guy is starting with that. So ISTPs, there is no logical puzzle that you can throw at an ISTP that they couldn't figure out. And you know, at the highest level, like the electrician job, like these guys, like at the highest level, when you're like setting up like a power plant or something, these guys actually have to be able to solve some pretty complex problems. And that's what this tier list is also about. You know, like, of course, many types could do the job. I'm sure like an ENFJ or an ESFJ could do the job. But like when it comes to the most demanding task, like we're not searching for like who can do the job, like functionally, like who can like, you know, do the mandatory. We're searching for the guy who's like, who would be the best electrician to do it all. Like at the highest level, you could be building CERN, you know, the Large Hadron Collider underneath Earth, like in Europe, you know, where I live, you know, and the ISTP could just show up and they could just fucking build CERN for you, man. That is the biggest, you know, scientific, electrical, you know, experiment in history. And the ISTP could do it. Secondary function SE, so they are super highly acutely aware of their environments, total fucking monkeys. They can climb anywhere, they can be in any position, and they're super crafty, meticulous. You know, throw in the tertiary NI, and you just got like more brains to go. They figure out the underlying nature of everything, and then they fix that shit. So ISTPs would just be the penultimate, hands down, of all of the types, the greatest type to be an electrician. There's just no way around it. If there was like an S plus tier, the ISTP would there by themselves alone. Okay. Now, who else? Their sister type, of course, ESTPs. SETI, you know, the SETI or TISE, it might just be the best two function combo for being an electrician. Like you got the super brains, you can figure out logical problems on the fly, and then you are super highly aware of the physical environment. You're really good with your hands, and you see everything, and you notice everything, and you find everything, and you figure out everything. TISE, even if the ESTP has a tertiary FE function that you don't do shit with, I mean, you just have to give it to them, the S tier, which gets us to the ESTJ. You know, let's face the facts here, guys. I mean, being an electrician would be an ST profession. Like the best guys would just be STs. You know, the ESTJ, the ESTJ might not have the biggest brains because they're going with TE. TI is more brains, but the ESTJ, you know, they do have tertiary NE, which would probably like come to their aid in solving the few random, more complex problems that TE couldn't figure out. ESTJs, they would be meticulous, careful, they would do the best wires, and I do like ESTJs could still like figure out most of the problems without getting confused. You know, maybe the ISTP could do like a little bit more complex, you know, analysis, but the ESTJ, I think they could just do the whole thing, which brings us to the ISTJ. Yeah, like the ISTJs, funnily enough, they don't like really have like a brains function. But the ISTJ is a weird guy. And you know why that they're a weird guy? The ISTJ doesn't have any good brains functions. They have like an inferior NE, which is the strongest function for having brains in their stacking. But the weird thing about ISTJs is that like they always have the brains. Like I'm not sure if I have ever like met like an ISTJ, who didn't have the brains. ISTJs have their own weird way of having mega brains. Like some of the most intelligent people that I have ever known were ISTJs, and I like it's a weird thing going on with SI and TE. Like the ISTJ, they go through all the data, they go through all the details, and they are the greatest detectives and inspectors, and somehow they notice every little detail, and somehow it brings them the brains required. Okay, so I do think like ISTJs could simply like they're the weird guy at the scene when it comes to brains, man. I have been thinking about it for a long time. Like, why do the ISTJs have brains when they don't have a brain function? They're like the weird guy. But I'm just saying, like, I don't think like there's any like puzzle or logical problem that like INFJ couldn't do. And they're super detail oriented. They notice everything, and they're just like they would be great, electricians as well. And this is pretty much like the S tier in my view. I mean, it's like the STs and the ENTJ. I think the ENTJ is like the most ST of all of the intuitives, and the most like technical and mechanic guy of the intuitives, which is why I like the ENTJ is kind of like the only intuitive like at the S tier, because it is a very physical profession, and the other intuitives are kind of like a little bit too abstract. The ENTJ is a really hard-grained individual. The ENTJ like is really close to physical reality, like TESE combo, and ENTJs, they live and breathe physical mechanics, so they deserve the S tier for sure. Now, that being said, what about the INFJ? The INFJ and the INFP actually, in my view, are like really curious beasts when it comes to being an electrician, because INFJs and INFPs, they both have the brains. INFJs have NI and TI. So once again, like, the INFJs get their NI superpower online by having the support of the TI coming in to save the day when it comes to figuring out the logical mechanics of the complexities of the matter, which the ENFJ can do. INFJs definitely have the brains. They are one of the smartest types in the system. The INFP, they have NE alone, and here you see the difference, guys. Like ENFJs, they begin to confuse. INFPs, I don't think that they do actually. Like INFPs with NESI going on, and NE is simply so much better in figuring out all the random little mechanical details and patterns and everything. I actually think like INFPs would be way better as an electrician than the ENFJ. I like INFPs like wouldn't become as confused by endless quantity of logical mechanic. I like the NE is simply so much better for the task at hand. The INFP also don't have any other brains function. Now, that being said, both of the INFJ and the INFP, I mean, they are super abstract. They're completely out of touch with reality. INFPs maybe less so. They're a little bit more laid back, and the NE brings them to an adventure, but still, they are emo bitches. I like INFJs and INFPs would surprisingly enough have the brains. INFPs are the most undervalued type when it comes to having brains. Everybody sees them as these like emo bitches, but they actually have insane brains. There's been studies made on intelligence and MBTI type, and INFPs, they're always scoring the highest, man. They're like right up there with like INTJs and INTPs and everybody. It's a weird thing. But INFPs are actually super smart and super clever. And that's the NE. That's the power of the NE, brothers. Okay, there's no way around it. Now, that being said, and I feel like INFPs would be better than the INFJ, in being an electrician, simply because INFPs are more aware of their surroundings with their NE. They're more laid back. They're more monkey. They're more explorative. INFPs do have quicker brains. They're the NE gives them quicker brains than INFJs. INFPs would get along better with the construction working brutes because INFPs are so laid back and they could, like, INFPs could maybe like go with the flow and be with the guys. The INFJs, they are weak. And INFJs, you could no longer be the special snowflake at the site because nobody would give a shit and you start crying. The INFPs, they would be the emo bitch at the site, but they could still probably learn to live with the hard-grained, beer-drinking, sausage eating, low emotional IQ idiots at the construction site. And I like INFPs, which is, I don't know, they would have greater observational skills. They would be like a little bit more nimble. Now, that being said, I don't think that the difference would be high. I don't like INFPs would get into the B tier, and their C tier, and there's like above INFJs, really. Yeah, I think that these two types they're too abstract, too out of touch with reality. It's like a pure like a ST craft, and these guys are like the antithesis of being an ST. They have the brains for it, but it's just like this endless physical labor and physical mechanic, and these like they could figure it out, but they would struggle a little bit in just doing physical stuff like 8 hours straight. So once again, I'm not sure if I would recommend becoming an electrician, but I like INFPs, INFJs, they could do it if they really wanted to, and so on. Like I would say, like I would advise, like I have a weird thing with INFPs when it comes to being an electrician. I actually did like an INFP could do it. I have this weird, like I like INFPs could make a feasible electrician. Like I would like, if an INFP really wanted to be an INF like an electrician, I would be like, you go for it, man. Like you go. I would like to, like I don't know, man. I would vote for the INFP. Like I would say, like, you're barely do it, man. I would recommend becoming an electrician for the INFP way more than for the ENFJ or the ESFJ, for example. INFPs could figure it out, and they have the tertiary SI, so that they have some physical modicum of physicality. And with the NE, they're quick brains, quick on their feet, explorative. Yeah, I like INFPs might actually make a feasible like electrician if they really wanted to do it for some weird FI reason, okay? Now, what about the ENTP? On the previous section of the video, I said that the NE would be like an S tier function for being an electrician, and ENTP is kind of like the very epitome of NE. And TI was also like an S tier function. Now the problem is that like NETI, like I just have to say, like I like that is like almost like too much brains for being an electrician. That's like a double brains guy, man. Of course, like ISTPs can have like super strong NI, and then they're gonna be double brained as well. But ENTPs, I mean, they just like have double the brains, and that's almost like an overreach. That's like you got too much brains for this shit, man. Like it's the same thing with INTPs and INTJs, and these three types are like too much brains for the task at hand. Now that being said, the ENTP. I actually think like ENTPs might just be the second, like the best A tier guy to be an electrician, or would it be the INTP? I know it would be the INTP. But the ENTPs, it's just like you're like just like a little bit too hazardous, man. Like ENTPs are monkeys, they are clever, fast, nimble. They would solve and fix all the problems on the fly while running and climbing and like cracking up jokes and being super sarcastic. and they would make the whole construction site laugh in tears while solving all the problems and so on. But it's still like a very physical craft. Like ENTPs spending their whole day doing something with their hands just wouldn't be their forte, to be honest. I like ENTPs would make for some of the most feasible guys. They would be able to predict problems, notice problems, find the problems, solve the problems, and just run around the site doing everything imaginable and pulling it off, okay? But they do have a tertiary FE and an inferior SI, guys. They have an inferior physical function. ENTPs wouldn't be the greatest in doing the actual wires, in like, drawing the wire through the pipe and drilling a hole into the wall and another hole and another hole, and then it would become a little bit twisted when the ENTP would do it. They would forget things, they would be a little bit hazardous, they wouldn't remember the details, and they would get confused every now and then, and yeah, they just wouldn't be as careful as all of these S-tier guys. They would be making little mistakes and so on. They would have it's like all of these S-tier guys have enough brains. The ENTPs have too much brains. So like you would start getting diminishing returns on your brains as an ENTP. I like an ENTP would make for like the second best, like the next best thing for being an electrician. But they wouldn't be the perfect fit. I like the ISTP is the perfect fit, That is the penultimate guy with nothing extra in their shit. Like ENTPs, too much brains, too little physical, hands and shits. The INTPs, however, I actually like the INTPs would be the best of the A tier. Because INTPs, they have too much brains, they have just as much brains as the ENTP. They might lack in observational and explorative capabilities compared to the ENTP. I like the ENTP would notice things faster with their NE. Now, that being said, INTPs are relatively observational, and once again, they have the tertiary SI. And it is, for the most part, a physical labor job. So I like an INTP would do better in spending the whole day, using SI than the ENTP, to be honest. ENTPs would be frustrated. INTPs would be slightly frustrated. Now, INTPs can also be super abstract and everything and so on. But I like INTPs. There's like the super scientists, type. And being an electrician, that's a technical purpose. They would have too much brains for it, but, I like INTPs would probably be the best, electrician. Like after the ST guys and the intuitive ST ENTJ. INTJs, I have to say, I don't know, like INTJs would like being an electrician. I like INTJs would fucking hate it. INTJs are super abstract. They are control freaks at the construction site. Everything is always going to shit. You're always correcting some asshole's mistake. Somebody did a wire like 10 years ago and it's buried somewhere in the hidden shafts of the 10-story building, and you have to crawl and climb and fucking everybody's an asshole. And INTJ electrician would be the most frustrated INTJ in the history of mankind. INTJs want to work in peace. They want to work within the box where everything is a controlled operation. The only outside box that they want to do is the scientific stuff, but in the electrical fields, as an electrician, you would be doing the mechanical stuff, the hard physical mechanical stuff. INTJs, they don't have great observational skills. They're leading with NI. So INTJs are kind of out of touch with reality. They are a little bit more in touch with their TE. because it's a more hard-grained executional function in the outside reality, but they're still like out of it compared to ENTPs. I mean, ENTPs are out of it because they're so hazardous and they're so all over the place and so ADHD, but INTJs, they have an inferior SE. So their observational skills are not that great. Now, that being said, TE as a secondary function, TE is such a powerful function for being an electrician that I do that like the INTJs would just have the brains for an eternity. There's no logical problem. Even the most complex stuff that you would be facing when building CERN, underground in Europe, the Large Hadron Collider, the INTJ could just figure it out, man. They have the brains, and the TE, INTJs would be doing better wires than the ENTP. I like INTJs who probably have a little bit more hands than the ENTP. ENTP would notice more things, but the INTJ would get the better job done, So I like at the end of the day, I mean, an INTJ could just be an electrician. I'm not sure if I would recommend it. It would be too frustrating. But if you are an INTJ, you desperately want to get into some like physical craft, like go and do it. Like I like INTJs would at the end of the day still make for feasible. Electricians, they would just be constantly frustrated because there's always something surprising going to shit in physical reality, and INTJs fucking hate that shit. At the construction site, nothing ever goes according to plan. Everybody's fucking around, and then you have to redo shit, and somebody fucking build a wall in the wrong place, and it's like everything goes to shit. Like as an INTJ, like you would be fucking screaming like, what the fuck is happening here again? Yet another day of this shit. But I like INTJs could do it. They could figure it out. They could do the whole thing, and yeah. I like they just would be at the end of the day like pretty good and respected electricians, like probably okay. Now the ENFP is a curious guy with the ESFP, to be honest, and you know why that is, guys? That is because there is this thing called the polar function, which is the opposite function of your tertiary function. It's a curious function because that is kind of like the blind spot of your type. Like the polar function, which for the ENFPs and ESFPs is TI, introverted thinking, is actually their polar function, which means that like these guys are just like, when it comes to your polar function, it's worse than your inferior function. Like your polar function is a function that you don't even know that it exists. Like you are oblivious to the whole realm of this function. Which would be a little bit problematic for being an electrician. Like for the most part, for most of the tasks, like SETE, NETE could do like most of the tasks, but like ENFPs and ESFPs, like when logical mechanics get too complex, these guys actually surprisingly get confused about it. That being said, the ENFP could compensate with their NE. NE alone is a super brains function that could figure out the mechanics by itself, and so as like ENFPs, I like they almost like get a pass. Like, they could figure it out still, so I like the ENFP, yeah. They wouldn't be as brainy as the ENTPs, but like ENFPs would just like have just enough, like just like a good quantity of brains for the electrician, and maybe even too much. Like I have hard time imagining anything that like the ENFP couldn't do that the ENTP could do with NE alone. And TE would help them, make them a little bit better in doing the, simple mechanical shit. Like I am always surprised when I see an ENFP how capable they are in taking some like simple sequence and then executing with their tertiary TE and so on. They might become slightly confused every now and then with their polar TI, but I mean, they would still do it. And they would have great observational skills. They are even greater monkeys than ENTPs. Like ENFPs, they know how to dance and shit. All of that physical nimbleness would be put to use as an electrician when you'd be like fucking doing weird positions, and pulling the wires at the same time. The ENFP could do all the monkey stuff. Now the ESFPs, like I just hate to say it, but I like the ESFPs. They don't like really have a brains function, guys. I mean, like they have like an inferior NI, which to begin with wouldn't be the greatest, brains function for an electrician, but they also have like a polar TI. So I'm sorry to say, but like ESFPs, they don't fucking have brains. Now the SETE, I mean, that is an insanely good combo for technical, mechanical work. I like ESFPs as car mechanics, for example, would be the greatest. I like ESFPs could do like 99% of the electrician stuff with the highest level of capacity. But I do like when it comes to like building CERN underground, like the Large Hadron Collider in Europe. Like I'm not sure if I'd want to have like an ESFP building that shit, like to be honest, and programming all the complex like command centers at the power plant, and that kind of shit. Like I like ESFPs, like SE, like I said, like ESFPs and ISFPs, to be honest, they're kind of like the example of like how much brains can you derive like out of SE. And for something like electrical work, like that's almost like you're almost getting brains from just like being so acutely aware of like everything that is happening in physical reality. So I like ESFPs and ISFPs as well, that they would have these like weird brains for the job at hand. But I just have to say, like ISFPs with NI, ESFPs with inferior NI and TE going on, they have like a little bit TE. I like ESFPs and ISFPs. They would be like the guy who could do the job, like do the mandatory stuff. But once again, I would not invite these electricians to build CERN, which is one of the most complex electrical, buildings ever conceived by man in history. Who knows, maybe there was some civilization like, 50,000 years ago that we don't even know about. And they were doing it even better, okay? But ESFPs and ISFPs, like I'm just so sorry, like they just don't have like the more complex logical stuff. Like I don't even have the brains for that shit. Like I like you could be an electrician as an ESFP. I'm sure there's a lot of ISFP electricians and so on. Like if you want to go for it, like go for that shit. If you have like a high IQ, maybe you could like you could do it and so on. But it's like these neither one of these guys have an actual brains function, like anywhere close to their top rankings. An ISFP with really strong NI, but that's still like NI, and so on. So it's just like, like I think they could do it. Like I think they would do better than INFPs and INFJs simply because they're like physical types. ESFPs and ISFPs with the SE, like they would be really good at like spending the whole day doing things with their hands and climbing to the fucking roof to, set up some weird electrical shit or something. And so on, like they could do all like they would do like, 90% of the time, whatever you're doing as an electrician, like these guys would be nailing that shit. But I'm just saying like these guys have the brains as well. And these guys they got the TE strong going on. And ESFP with really strong TE, I think could get to the A tier basically, But there's something weird about the ISTJ, like SITE. It somehow weirdly has like way more brains than the SE TE. I would definitely hold the ESFP above the ISFP. Like I'm really tempted of just like taking the ESFP and putting it to the A tier. But I just like have to say, man, like these guys simply don't have the fucking brains, and like all of these types, if you really want to be an electrician, like you can do it. I don't think there's any type that couldn't do it. Like it's not like that fucking demanding or anything. But we're talking this is a tier list, guys. This is like who would be better. And I do think that these intuitive guys with their super fucking double brains, they would just be better at solving all of the technical problems faster. And you could throw these guys to CERN. like the Large Hadron Collider underneath the ground in Europe where I live. And they could build that shit, guys. The ESFP, man, I would doubt it. I would doubt that the ESFP would understand the totality of the endeavor in question, okay? So it's like I have to put these guys underneath, but like, you know, like I'm like your average electrician. If you're not like a master electrician or something, like, you know, my friend's father used to be an electrician. And he was like an ISTP. And this guy was a smart guy, and you know, there are these different levels to being an electrician. And it's like, you know, the ISTP electrician who was my friend's father, like he worked in a small town as an electrician, like the town's electrician, like for the town, you know, shit, like the town government or where the shit, like the maintenance of the city or the town maintenance guy. And he was the only guy who would do the most demanding electrical work, you know, that the other electricians were too stupid to do it. So I like an ESFP, like could do like 95% of everything required. But like then if you want to get to the more demanding shit, like you need to have brains, man. There's no way around it. Like most of the electricians never get to that level, like my friend's father. But these like a tier list guys, and these guys, like these are the guys who could do the whole thing, you know. And these guys would struggle a little bit, you know. So it's like have to be below these other guys, okay? Like I'm sure there's a lot of like super brilliant ESFPs, but like I like ISTPs, just like generally speaking, they have a better functional stacking. We're looking at functional stackings around here, guys. All of these guys can become super high level electricians if you have the IQ and put in the effort and everything. But like the ISTP was born to do it, guys. And this is why the ESFP, ISFPs can't get to the fucking A tier, guys. I'm so sorry. The ISFJ. The ISFJ actually has an actual brains function. The best brains function for being an electrician as a tertiary function, guys. I like the ISFJ. It's kind of like the most like ST, you know, of the feelers, I think. The SITI combo, like, you know, like if the SITE combo is enough, like the SITI combo, I like an ISFJ would make for a good electrician. Like this is like the SITI, the tertiary TI. They would have to develop that TI a lot to a point where it's almost like their secondary function. And some ISFJs have insanely strong TIs. You know, some ISFJs have stronger TIs and FEs. I like ISFJs are kind of like the bare minimum of having fucking brains for an electrician, that they might even be able to do even the more demanding shits. You know, I like ISFJs who have strong TI, they have more brains than the ESFP. Just like a little bit. It's like they have that like a little bit like of an edge with the TI, man, because the TI is the best brains function for pure logical mechanic. So yeah, I like the ISFJ would just make the A tier like barely. They would be like barely, but and the other thing is like ISFJs, they're meticulous, they're careful, they're good with their hands, they have attention to details. They could just do like a really proficient job in doing the wires and pulling all the physical stuff. And ISFJs, surprisingly, I have known a lot of ISFJs in my life, and they're surprisingly monkey people. Like they're nimble. Like I have many friends who are ISFJs, and when we were kids as boys and we were playing outside and so on, like ISFJs, like not all of them, but like most of the ISFJ little boys were monkeys, man. They were out there like with everybody else, and I like ISFJs could do all the physical random shit. You know, ISFJs would be, they would be making feasible, you know, electricians. They would be super strong with the physical stuff, and they would just like have barely enough brains in their functional stacking to actually like have the brains, man. So yeah, So as like an closing argument, I would say like all of the types can be electricians. It's not like can you do it or not. Like I'm not sure if I would recommend being an electrician if you are these guys. But starting from INFPs, ISFPs, like if you really want to do it, like I would say like go for it, man. ESFPs and ISFPs, I mean like it's not like these guys suck or anything. You know, like they're just like they're not at the level with these guys, but like I'm sure there's a lot of ESFPs at the highest like high level of being an electrician, and I'm sure they love their jobs. And I don't want to be a dick here, like I don't want to talk these guys down, but I mean these guys these guys like have more brains and so on, and you know, so like at the end of the day, like I like if you want to be an electrician, like whatever type you have, just go for it. But if you are one of these guys, like you were born to do that shit, you were born to do that shit. These guys, like, you would have to ask the question, like, are you sure you want to do it? Like, ISFJ is actually like fucking, like, if you want to do it, like, go and do it, man. Like, I like an ISFJ would love being an electrician. You also hang around with the guys, you know, and ESFPs and ISFPs, you want to do it, go for that shit. Like, I'm not sure, like, these guys have to wonder, like, if you would want to do something a little bit more abstract. But they could do it, you know. But yeah, like I mean, these S tier guys are just like the epitome of being an electrician. Like they were born to do it. Their brains literally think like an electrician does. Especially the ISTP and the ESTJ, I would say, and the ESTP, okay. Like the ENTJ, the intuitive ST, like yeah, like they would just be like, I just can't imagine anything that an electrician would do that the ENTJ would be fucking like fucking nailing that shit. Okay. So yeah, these are the tier lists, and you know, yeah, welcome to the channel, guys. Like I'm gonna be making more of these tier lists, you know, and so on. So like, yeah, okay. These are tier lists for the electrician. Okay, bye bye.